I turned to one of the girls who was putting on her hat and said, "Where does that smoke come from?"
Welcome to MsMojo, and today we're looking at some of the most gut-wrenching moments from history, focusing specifically on women's history. Be warned, some of these topics are beyond gruesome, making this video not for the faint of heart.
As a woman myself with two daughters, these are not the kinds of things that can continue to happen.
Emily Davidson's death. In the United Kingdom, women only gained the same voting rights as men in 1928. This achievement took decades of struggle, with the suffragettes spearheading the cause.
There is something in this movement that no power of opposition, whether of the government or the people, can stop.
One of the most famous freedom fighters was Emily Davidson, who fought hard for her right to vote. This included smashing windows, burning post boxes, and even planting bombs. She was a wild card who frequently put herself in harm's way against her superiors' will.
It brought the demands of the suffragettes to light, but it also showed the extent to which they were willing to make a sacrifice for what we considered to be just a very basic vote. And it shows that women at the time, British women, had to really fight to get changes to British parliamentary democracy.
Her final act was walking onto the track of a horse race, where she was knocked down and killed by King George V's horse. Her sacrifice made headlines, and she'll be forever remembered for her remarkable bravery.
The suffragette leadership had not been party to her plan, but they took charge of her funeral, a spectacular event watched by millions.
Lady Jane Grey's execution. Edward VI was the short-lived heir of Henry VIII, and following his untimely death, his cousin Lady Jane Grey ascended to the throne.
Is this a dream come true for our reluctant couple, or a nightmare incarnate? I'm sure everything will work out just fine.
This greatly upset Edward's devoutly Catholic sister Mary, whom he had removed from the line of succession. Per Edward's will, Jane was all but forced to take the crown when she was only 16 or 17, effectively becoming a Protestant puppet queen.
Their assumption that Jane would bend to their bidding was mistaken. Their belief that Guildford would become king was wrong. And their certainty that Mary would simply go quietly was the biggest miscalculation of all.
Mary was able to marshal support and deposed her after only 9 days. Instead of sparing Jane and allowing her to become a Protestant rallying point, Mary had her executed. The most haunting part of her story is that when blindfolded on the brink of death, Jane struggled to find the execution block.
Where is it? Where is it? What do I do?
Sophie Scholes' execution. Nazi Germany is regarded as one of the most evil regimes in human history. As you might expect, not all its citizens were happy with the state of affairs. Many fought the good fight, no matter how overwhelming the odds. Sophie Scholl was one of these heroes.
By 1942, they had grown skeptical of Nazi propaganda, and it was hard for them to understand what their generation was supposed to be fighting and dying for. And so they felt that Hitler and the Nazis were ruining the country that they loved.
Sophie was a leader of the White Rose, a non-violent resistance group who called for an end to the Nazi regime. Unfortunately, a janitor turned them over to the Gestapo, and they were put on trial.
Sollen wir denn auf ewig das vor aller Welt ausgestoßene und gehasste Volk sein?
Ach, ein Herrenvolk interessiert das nicht.
Ihr Herrenvolk will in Wirklichkeit Frieden. Dass die Menschenwürde wieder Achtung findet.
It was far from fair, with Sophie and her brother being sentenced to death. They were executed by guillotine when Sophie was only 21 years old.
Die Sonne scheint noch.
The tragedy of Anne Frank. Our next entry is yet another victim of the Nazi regime.
I can do anything. I'm very handy.
No privileges for criminals of West Barracks. May I ask of what crime we're accused? Failure to report when ordered.
Anne Frank was born German and Jewish, but fled to the Netherlands after Hitler took control. In 1942, she and her family were forced into hiding, where Anne famously spent her time writing in a diary.
Since you've never had to disappear, I'll try to give you an idea of our life. I call our hiding place the Secret Annex.
After 2 years, they were discovered by the Gestapo and arrested. Frank was sent to a concentration camp, where she died of typhus only months short of liberation. Her father, Otto, the only surviving member of their group in hiding, would go on to publish her diary, allowing millions to understand the tragedy of the Holocaust through Anne's personal experience.
Anne Frank's diary remains one of the most widely read books across the globe. It's been translated into over 60 languages, and over 30 million copies are in print. The world will never forget the story of Anne Frank and her family.
Salem witch trials. Between 1692 and 1693 in colonial Massachusetts, more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft. 30 of them were found guilty, with 19 of them punished by hanging. Witch trials weren't unique to the region. They were rampant in Europe, taking the lives of between 40,000 and 60,000 people. While some men were persecuted, most were older women.
I saw Sarah Good with the devil! I saw Goody Osborne with the devil! I saw Bridget Bishop with the devil! I saw Goody Howe with the devil! I saw Goody Barrow with the devil! I saw Goody Good with the devil! I saw Goody Osborne with the devil!
The trials reflected the period's extreme misogyny. When women were independent, outspoken, and just generally didn't fit with societal norms, they were viewed as threats.
The porters come out and try to start mobilizing the villagers of Salem to try to put a stop to these witch trials. As they're trying to mobilize these villagers, subsequently, 19 of their friends end up being accused of witchcraft.
It was a hysteria-fueled nightmare, where anyone could have their life ruined in an instant. Afterward, participants admitted to fabricating evidence, but the damage had already been done, and innocent lives can't be brought back.
I petition to your honors not for my own life, for I know I must die and my appointed time is set, but, if it be possible, no more innocent blood may be shed.
The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. The Industrial Revolution saw the rise of giant factories and mass production, but health and safety were rarely a priority. One tragic example was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory.
Sewing machine operators faced a 14-hour workday for $2 a day at most. And that was before bosses docked their pay for the needles, the thread, the electricity they used.
In 1911, a garment factory in Manhattan caught fire. Amazingly, it was common practice to lock the building exits, along with stairwell doors, to prevent work breaks. Unfortunately, when the fire broke out, many of the workers were unable to escape.
The fire was spreading faster now, feeding itself on piles of shirtwaists, wooden tables, even the fabric dust that hung in the air. The only precaution the Triangle owners had taken against this sort of disaster, a dozen red pails of water, sat impotent in the corners.
123 women and 23 men died, not just from the fire, but also from jumping to their deaths. It was New York's deadliest industrial disaster. The tragedy at least helped to make fire safety a priority, but that came at a terrible cost.
Rarely do you get an opportunity for such legislative reform, but women had to burn first in order for this to happen.
The Radium Girls. Our next entry comes from a similar time period, when safety standards were non-existent and workers were treated with little humanity. In the 1920s, female factory workers were paid to paint watches with radium. They were all told it was harmless, a despicable lie since radium is extremely radioactive.
Stuff cures everything. Nausea, melancholy, impotence, ennui.
Their bosses told them to use their lips to point their brushes, causing them to ingest lethal levels of the substance. It was a disgusting act of worker exploitation, especially since the owners and scientists avoided radium exposure.
Everyone put down your brushes. Miss Cavallo! An autopsy of Mary showed that there was radium in her bones. Joe and I were just examined.
Miss Cavallo, you are sorely mistaken if you think you can continue working here. I quit.
Everyone, you have to come to the doctor!
Women had long been subject to this kind of treatment, as proven by the Match Girls strike in 1888. Workers protested unethical treatment and conditions, including the exposure to white phosphorus, which caused many to suffer from a painful ailment called phossy jaw.
And they knew it. But they decided that profit mattered more than we did.
You're coming with me.
Shh. It ain't typhus that's killing us. It's the phosphorus.
What we work with every day.
Magdalene Laundries in Ireland.
This isn't a prison. You can leave any time you want. But where would you go? Who would have you?
In 19th century Britain, a quote, fallen woman was a woman thought to have fallen from grace. This originally meant sex workers, but extended to victims of sexual assault, orphans, or just anyone they didn't consider normal. In 18th century Ireland, Magdalene asylums for these women, operated largely by the Catholic Church, were opened. Historians estimate they held about 30,000 women before they finally shut down in the 20th century.
These are the earthly means to cleanse your very soul, to remove the stains of the sins you have committed. Here you may redeem yourself and, God willing, save yourself from eternal damnation.
Women were placed there against their will and forced to work unpaid, grueling hours in laundries. Some were trapped there for decades, essentially treated as prisoners. Ireland only closed its last Magdalene Laundry in 1996, marking a long overdue end to this abhorrent form of slavery.
My life started to get a little bit better. But still the nightmares will always be there with us, what happened to us. Hidden tunnels when the inspectors would come, and still haven't got justice, proper justice to this day.
Forced sterilization of indigenous women.
I'm confident, based on what I've heard and the discussions that I've had, that there are thousands throughout Canada.
The US and Canada's governments have had a long history of committing extreme injustices against Indigenous inhabitants. Some experts currently consider the colonization of America to have been a continental genocide. Around 90 to 95% of all Native Americans died between the 15th and 17th centuries. Many assume flagrant mistreatment stopped in the distant past, but governments were forcibly sterilizing Indigenous women well into the 1970s.
We need to find out to what level, to how many, what are the numbers. The stats need to be exposed, because it's only then that the Canadian population will understand.
Many of the procedures were done forcibly, without consent. Some studies found that between 1970 and 1976, 25 to 50% of Native American women were sterilized. This form of eugenics was also extended to both Black and poor women.
North Carolina sterilized over 7,600 people between the 1930s and 1970s, 65% of whom were Black women.
It's easy to assume all the horrors of colonialism happened centuries ago, but this is far from the truth.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Comfort women of World War II. During World War II, the Imperial Japanese Army enslaved hundreds of thousands of women to act as sex workers against their will.
나이가 어려서 그런 생각은 처음부터 해보지를 못했어요. 아직까지 지 장소에 안 갔다 하는 것만 알고 있었지.
They came from both their conquered territories and Japan, with the majority from Korea. It was intended to reduce the spread of diseases and minimize sexual assault, but it had the opposite effect. Victims were called comfort women, although their lives were anything but comfortable.
60살 때 아무래도 생각해도 분하고 원통해서 해결이 날 것 같아서 신고를 하고 보니
Following the war, the Japanese government tried to destroy all evidence, denied their existence, and refused to apologize. Eventually, they apologized in 1993, but many South Koreans found the apology lacking. Some government officials even deny they were inhumane, with Osaka's mayor calling for the destruction of comfort women statues.
I want the Emperor of Japan to come to us and get down on his knees in front of us and then reflect on what they've done and explain what actually happened.
Let's lighten things up. What do you think is the most heartwarming moment from human history? Let us know in the comments below.